Welcome to Forbidden Desires channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. You never think the most unforgettable moment of your life will come from your own child. But when he looked at me that night and asked for help, something deep inside me cracked, not in a loud, dramatic way. No, it was quiet, almost gentle, like when a glass breaks underwater, slow and silent but still shattered all the same. I know how that sounds, I do, and I don't expect you to understand it right away. Honestly, I'm still trying to understand it myself, but let me ask you this. Have you ever gone so long feeling invisible that the first person to truly look at you, to really see you, was someone who wasn't even supposed to, someone whose eyes were never meant to hold that kind of weight when they met yours? Because that's what happened to me. I was just going through the motions. Day in, day out, wife, mother, cook, cleaner, listener, ghost. I smiled when I needed to, laughed at the right moments, said I'm fine more times than I could count. But inside I was tired. Not physically tired. No, this was something heavier. I was emotionally starved, quietly crumbling, and the worst part, nobody noticed. Not my husband, who hadn't kissed me like he meant it in years, not my friends who always assumed I was the strong one, not even me sometimes, but my son. He noticed. It didn't happen all at once. It wasn't some grand moment of revelation, with music swelling in the background. It was slow, subtle, like watching a puzzle fall together when you didn't even know you were holding the pieces. And then one night he sat across from me, his voice shaky, his eyes unsure, and he said something that would change the way I saw myself and him forever. I froze. My heart felt like it forgot how to beat, because in that one sentence I realized how far I drifted from the life I thought I had, from the woman I thought I was, and from the boundaries I believed I'd never even think to question. What do you do when someone you love says something that makes the whole world tilt just a little off its axis, when they look at you not as their parent but as a person, flawed, fragile, desperate to feel alive again? I never imagined I'd feel more seen by my son than I did by my own husband, and that alone should have been the warning sign, but I was already too deep in it to back away. And maybe you're sitting there now judging me. Or maybe, just maybe, you're feeling what I'm saying more than you'd like to admit. Because if you've ever felt neglected, unseen, or quietly breaking under the weight of your own life, then you know it doesn't take much to fall when you're already on the edge. Before we dive deeper into the story, 'cause trust me, it gets much more complicated. Make sure to subscribe to Forbidden Desires. This is where we talk about the things no one wants to admit out loud, where we peel back the layers of love, betrayal, and everything messy in between. And if you have ever experienced a moment that shook you to your core, one of those moments that changed the way you saw yourself forever, drop a love emoji in the comments. You're not alone. I promise you're not now. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story doesn't start with my son's question. It starts with everything that came before it. Let me take you back to before the question, before that night, before everything changed. We lived in this 3-story house on the corner of a quiet cul-de-sac, white fence, freshly cut lawn, a porch swing I used to love. When we first moved in from the outside, we looked like everything a family was supposed to be. But inside it was quiet, and not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that lingers in the air like fog, heavy and unspoken. I'm in my late 20s now, and for the longest time, I used to think I had it all: a husband, a son, a home. But slowly, without even realizing, it all started slipping through my fingers, and the worst part is I didn't fight it, I just let it happen. My husband Rob used to be this sweet, passionate man. When we first met, he made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. But somewhere between promotions and late-night emails, he started forgetting anniversaries, forgetting how I liked my coffee, forgetting me. He was married to his work, and I was just a shadow that moved around the house. Dinner was always ready. Laundry always folded, everything in its place, but our bed cold, his eyes distant, and his hands, they hadn't touched me like they meant it in years. At first I told myself it was just a phase, that he was stressed, that he'd come back to me. But 1 year turned into 3, then 3, and the only thing he brought back home at night was silence. Then there was Henry, our son. Teen, shy kind, the kind of boy who still says thank you and holds the door open for strangers. He had my eyes, but his heart was too big for a world like this. Henry and I had always been close, but something changed once he hit his final year of high school. He started lingering after dinner, sitting with me on the couch, asking me these personal questions. First, they were harmless. Mom, how did you know Dad was the one? Do relationships always get harder as time goes on, but over time the questions got heavier. He'd look at me like he was searching for answers. I wasn't sure I had any more, and I'd answer as best as I could, even if it meant lying just a little, because how do you tell your son that the love you thought would last forever faded quietly while you were folding laundry? I remember one night in particular. I was walking down the hallway to bring Henry a glass of water. His door was cracked open and I heard him on the phone talking to a girl. I think his voice was nervous. A little shaky. He was trying so hard to say the right thing, to be confident, to impress her. But then she must have said something and his whole tone changed. He stumbled, went quiet, and then I heard the sound of the call ending. I stepped back quickly before he could see me. Later that night, he sat beside me on the couch, slouched, a little quiet. I don't get it, he mumbled. Why is it so hard just to be with someone? I smiled, tried to make it like, oh, trust me. Even adults haven't figured that one out, but deep inside something stirred because that look in his eyes, confused, vulnerable, reaching for comfort, I recognized it. It was the same look I saw in my own reflection, the same loneliness, the same ache to be understood, the same quiet hope that someone might see you, even if just for a moment. Henry started spending more time at home after that, less with his friends, more with me. Helping me cook. Picking out movies we could watch together. He even started remembering the little things, like how I always hummed while washing dishes or how I cried at that same scene in every movie. It wasn't anything inappropriate, not then, but it was different, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice. Rob, meanwhile, was in his own world. He'd walk in from work, barely glance at us, eat dinner in silence, and then bury himself in his laptop until bedtime. Sometimes I wondered if he even remembered who we were, if he remembered me, the pictures on our walls. They told a story that didn't match the one we were living, smiling family vacations, holiday dinners, birthday parties, but none of them recent. The frames gathered dust, and honestly, so did we. There were moments, fleeting tiny ones, when I would catch myself laughing at something Henry said, and I'd feel alive. And then just as quickly, I'd pull back because I knew that wasn't the kind of connection a mother should crave. But it was the only connection I had. I want to make this clear. I never went looking for what happened. I never planned it. But sometimes when you're starving, even a drop of attention feels like a feast. And when the only person who sees your pain is the one person who shouldn't, everything you thought you knew starts to unravel. That's where we were, 3 people living under the same roof, one emotionally absent, one emotionally raw, and one me stuck somewhere in between, quietly drowning in a life I no longer recognized. And that's when he asked the question that changed everything. It was late one of those nights where the whole house feels still, like the walls are holding their breath. Rob had gone to bed hours earlier without a word. As usual, I was standing in the kitchen sipping lukewarm tea. I'd forgotten to finish. The overhead light hummed faintly, and then Henry walked in. He startled me, a little still in his hoodie, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes glued to the floor. I remember thinking he's pacing himself like he was practicing the words in his head. Before he let them out, he leaned against the counter, not quite looking at me. Hey, Mom, he started. His voice was soft, a little shaky. I need to ask you something, and please don't laugh. I gave a small smile, trying to ease whatever was clearly weighing him down. Course, baby, what's going on? He exhaled slow, like he was letting go of something he'd been holding onto for a while, and then he said it. Mom, there's something I'm scared to do, and I can't talk to anyone else about it. There was a beat of silence, the kind of silence where the world seems to pause just long enough for everything in you to tighten. He still wasn't looking at me, just staring at his shoes like they might offer him a better way to say it. I think I'm supposed to know how, but I don't, and I'm scared. I'll mess it up. Everyone acts like it's nothing, but it's not for me. I tilted my head, confused but listening, not quite sure where this was going. He swallowed hard and then finally met my eyes. My first time being with someone. I don't know how to do it right. Time stopped, I didn't speak. I didn't even blink, because in that moment every thought in my head collided into a wall of disbelief. He was embarrassed, ashamed, even his cheeks were flushed, his voice barely above a whisper. And yet he had come to me, not a friend, not his father. Me, and I didn't know what to do with that. Why me? Why not Rob? Why not someone his own age, someone who could walk him through it without this kind of weight? But then again, maybe I didn't know why, because Rob was a ghost in this house, unavailable, uninterested, detached me. I was the only one who stayed present. I was the one who saw him, who remembered what he liked for breakfast, who listened, who asked questions about his day and actually cared about the answers. Maybe that's all it was. Maybe he just needed someone he trusted. But the way he looked at me, it wasn't wrong, it wasn't inappropriate, it was raw. He was vulnerable, scared, just a boy standing in front of the one person he believed wouldn't laugh, wouldn't judge, wouldn't shame him for not knowing. And in his eyes I saw something I hadn't seen in years. I saw need. Not the kind that takes, the kind that asks, and I hate to admit it. But I felt something stir in me, not desire, not attraction, but relevance. I felt needed, trusted, important, something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. I chuckled, trying to ease the tension. "Oh, honey," I said, waving my hand in that nervous, dismissive way. "That's nothing to be scared of." Everyone feels that way at first, but even as I said it, I knew my words were only brushing the surface, because deep inside something was shifting. He looked at me again, softer. "This time I knew you'd get it," he said. "You always do." And then he turned, muttered a quiet goodnight, and walked back to his room, leaving me standing in that dimly lit kitchen with my untouched tea and heart beating a little too fast. I didn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling, replaying those few minutes over and over. Why had it hit me so hard? It wasn't what he said, not really. It was the way he said it, like I was the only safe place he had, and I couldn't shake it. Couldn't push it away, because when you've been emotionally starved for years, even a moment of closeness can feel like sunlight to someone who's been living in the dark. I told myself it was just a conversation, that I was reading too much into it, that I was being dramatic. But deep down, I knew that night marked a turning point, because something in me had woken up and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to put it back to sleep. I wish I could tell you I brushed it off, that I moved on from that conversation like it was nothing. But the truth is, it stayed with me, lingered in my tea like an ache I couldn't name. The next evening I found myself in the bathtub, water lukewarm, the scent of lavender rising in the steam, and all I could think about was the look on his face when he said, "I knew you'd get it." That wasn't just a teenage boy needing advice. That was a person reaching out with trembling hands for connection, for safety, for something real. And I couldn't stop wondering why it had shaken me so deeply. Was it just maternal instinct? Was I overthinking, or was it something else? I closed my eyes and let myself sink a little deeper into the water. The soft splash echoed in the silence, there alone in the dim glow of candlelight, with the house quiet and my thoughts loud. I asked myself the question I didn't want to ask. Why did being the one he trusted feel so good? Why did it feel like my heart had been waiting to be chosen for something again? My mind wandered, uninvited, to Rob. To all the times he looked through me like I was a piece of the furniture, to the quiet dinners where he didn't even notice the effort I put into setting the table, to the cold nights where we laid side by side, inches apart but worlds away. There was a time he used to touch the small of my back in the kitchen, kiss my neck while I chopped vegetables, whisper, "You're beautiful," just because he felt it. That time felt like someone else's life now. And then there was Henry. Henry, who made space for me in his day. Henry, who asked questions and actually listened. Henry, who looked at me with open eyes and not like I was a task on a to-do list. I hated myself for feeling any of this, but feelings aren't logical. They don't knock politely before barging in. I started rationalizing it in my head. He doesn't mean anything wrong. He's just a boy lost in this world. I'm just someone he trusts. That's all this is. But even as I said it, something in me twisted. The next morning I watched him walk into the kitchen, sleep still in his eyes, hoodie slouched over his frame, and I noticed things I never let myself see before. How tall he'd gotten, how his voice had deepened just slightly, the way he smelled like clean soap and that cologne he probably didn't even know how to use yet. And then later that week, Rob snapped at me over something ridiculous. I can't even remember what it was, probably the way I folded his shirts or something equally stupid. His voice was sharp, dismissive. He didn't yell, but he cut with that tone he'd perfected over the years, like I was a burden, like everything I did was never enough, and before I could even respond, Henry stepped in. "Don't talk to her like that," he said. Firm, low, protective, and Rob just blinked at him, then scoffed and walked away. I stood there in the middle of the hallway, completely still, heart racing. He stood up for me. No one had done that in so long. I didn't know how to react. I tried to thank him to downplay it, but he just shrugged like it was nothing, but to me it wasn't nothing. It was everything I'd been craving without knowing it. Kindness, attention, respect, all from the last person I expected it from, and that terrified me. 'Cause it was getting harder to separate the lines. Harder to pretend that what I was feeling was simple. I found myself lingering in conversations with him, watching the way he smiled when he was proud of himself, wanting to protect him, but also wanting to feel seen by him, like maybe, just maybe, he saw something in me that I'd forgotten was still there. And then one night I had just turned off the lights in the living room. Rob was upstairs, long asleep. The house was dark, save for the soft hallway lamp. I was heading to my bedroom when I heard a soft, almost hesitant knock on my door. I froze completely still, breath caught in my throat. I didn't move, didn't say a word. I just stood there in the silence with my hand on the doorknob and my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears, because deep down I already knew who it was. I stood there, frozen on the other side of the door, his knock still echoing in my ears, soft, hesitant. Like he wasn't sure if he had the right to be there, but came anyway. I didn't open it, I couldn't, but I also didn't forget it. The next morning I pretended like nothing happened, so did he. We danced around it, like three people afraid of waking something up that was already stirring beneath the surface. But from that point on, everything started to shift. Henry became bolder, not in an obvious way, not disrespectful or inappropriate, but in small, subtle gestures that spoke volumes. He'd linger in the kitchen just a little longer after meals. He'd brush my hand when handing me something, and this time he didn't pull away so fast. He started calling me beautiful more often, casually, almost like a joke. But the way his eyes lingered on mine after the word left his mouth, it didn't feel like a joke. One night we were watching an old movie together on the couch, something I'd seen a dozen times before. Rob had retreated upstairs, muttering something about an early meeting. And there we were, just the three of us, the room dim, the only light coming from the flicker of the TV screen. We weren't even watching it, not really. At some point, Henry leaned closer and rested his head gently against my shoulder. I stopped breathing. Every part of me screamed to shift away, to create space, to protect the boundaries that were already dangerously thin. But I didn't move. I sat there, heart pounding, skin tingling, trying to convince myself that it didn't mean anything, that it was innocent, that it was just comfort and nothing more. But I felt it, that heat crawling up my neck, that ache in my C********T. And I knew the lines were no longer blurry. They were bending. He looked up at me and smiled, genuine, soft, and said, "You always smell nice, like home." What was I supposed to do with that? I laughed it off, trying to mask the storm rising inside me. But my hands trembled when I went to pour myself a glass of water later. 'Cause it had been so long since someone looked at me that way, like I was worthy of softness, of attention, of anything more than function. Then there was the day Rob lost it. I had forgotten to grab dry cleaning, just one of those days where my mind was somewhere else. He raised his voice at the dinner table, didn't even care that Henry was sitting right there, and before I could even respond, Henry slammed his fork down. "Stop talking to her like that," he said. Firm, angry, protective. Rob was stunned. So was I. He mumbled something under his breath and left the room. And Henry, he looked at me with this fierce intensity one didn't recognize. "I don't care if he's my dad. You don't deserve that." It was like something inside me cracked open. I wanted to cry, but instead I nodded and quietly thanked him. That night I laid in bed with my eyes wide open, staring into the dark thoughts. Racing memories flooding in, I started dreaming again. Dreams of when Rob and I were first in love. When he'd surprised me with flowers on a Tuesday, just because when he'd traced my spine with his fingers like it was a map he never wanted to forget when his love felt like a promise. And then I'd wake up and I wouldn't know whether to feel sad or relieved because I didn't miss the man Rob had become. I missed the woman I used to be, the one who laughed without guilt. The one who felt chosen, wanted, alive. I'd walk into the kitchen in the mornings, dazed, the dream still clinging to me like a fog. And then Henry would be there, already up, already making coffee. He'd smile, say good morning, ask how I slept, and we'd lock eyes for just a second too long. No words needed. We both felt it. I hated myself for it. I wanted to scream at my heart to behave, to remember who I was, who he was. But hearts don't listen to logic. They respond to feeling, and with every quiet morning, every shared glance, every moment of warmth I hadn't felt in years, the distance between us kept shrinking. And then during that quiet Saturday afternoon, as I was folding laundry on the couch surrounded by the soft scent of fabric sheets and sunlight streaming through the window, he sat down beside me, close, too close. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me fold one shirt after another, and then he took a breath, deep, nervous, and said, "Mom, I've been thinking about what I said the other night about needing help. I wasn't just talking about how, I was talking about who," and that's when I knew he was asking again. His words hung in the air like smoke. I wasn't just talking about how, I was talking about who. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My fingers kept folding the same shirt over and over again, like my brain needed something, anything to do, while my heart tried to make sense of what I'd just heard. He was sitting so close, so still, watching me with those honest eyes that once only saw me as a mother. And now they saw more. And I didn't know how to look back at him without betraying something in myself. Then he said it softly, like he was afraid of how far the words might reach once they left his mouth. "I trust you more than anyone. Please help me understand how to be close to someone." Time stopped. I felt like the earth tilted, like gravity changed direction, like I was floating in the very thing I had been starving for but didn't want to taste. My hands froze, the shirt slipped from my fingers and landed on the carpet like a sigh. I turned to him slowly. He was looking at me with so much tenderness, so much vulnerability, that it didn't feel like a boy talking to his mother anymore. Felt like a soul reaching for another, begging not to be alone. My heart slammed against my C*******T. I wanted to speak, to say no or stop or we can't, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I reached out, not to hold him, not to embrace him, just to steady myself. My hand found his, and the moment our fingers touched, time froze. I wish I could say it felt wrong right away, but it didn't. Felt warm, familiar, like standing at the edge of something forbidden and realizing how badly you've wanted to fall. But just before I could lean into it, just before the moment could stretch into something irreversible, something else, my breath caught in my throat. I yanked my hand back like it burned. "No," I whispered. He looked startled, hurt, like I just slammed a door. He didn't know he wasn't supposed to open. I stood up too fast, my pulse pounding in my ears, heat flooding my face, my C******T tightening like a vice. "I can't," I stammered, and before he could say anything else, I rushed out of the room, out of the living room, down the hallway into my bedroom, and slammed the door behind me. My knees gave out halfway to the bed. I collapsed onto the floor, hands over my mouth, sobbing so hard it felt like pieces of me were breaking apart with every breath. I had almost done it. I had almost stepped off a cliff I could never return from. And what scared me the most was how easy it would have been to let go, because it wasn't about lust, it wasn't about temptation. It was about being seen, being held, not with arms, but with presence, with trust, with love. And I had nearly lost myself in the warmth of it. I don't know how long I stayed there, minutes, maybe hours. Eventually I heard a soft knock on the door, and then his voice, quiet, fragile. "I'm sorry," he said. "I thought maybe you felt it too, and I did. God help me." I did. But in that moment, through the door with my hands trembling and my eyes swollen from crying, I saw it all so clearly. I saw the boy who still didn't fully understand his own heart, the boy who came to me because I had always been safe. And I saw the woman I had become, not the mother, not the wife, but the broken, aching shell of a woman who had mistaken her own emptiness for affection. And in that moment I whispered to myself. I saw the child he was and the broken woman I had become, and the shame of it swallowed me whole. The days that followed were quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that buzzes beneath your skin. Tense, fragile, waiting to break. Henry barely looked at me. He stopped coming into the kitchen in the mornings. No more shared glances over coffee, no more movie nights, no more questions, just silence. He locked himself in his room most days, headphones and door shut. If he spoke at all, it was one word, answers, eyes trained on the floor, voice stripped of the warmth that used to live there, and two didn't know how to reach him. Didn't know if I even had the right to. Every time I tried to knock, I stopped myself because what would I say? I'm sorry for not stopping things sooner. I'm sorry for enjoying being seen. I tried to redirect, to shift my focus. To reconnect with Rob, to pretend I could salvage something from the wreckage I'd helped create. One night I climbed into bed next to him and reached for his hand, but it just lay there, cold and unmoving. He didn't look at me, didn't ask if I was. I didn't notice the way I was clinging to the edge of something I couldn't name. I whispered, "Can we talk?" But he was already turned away. That was the answer, and so the silence grew louder. I stopped sleeping. Nights became this long stretch of darkness where thoughts played on repeat and regrets echoed louder than dreams. I started writing again. It was the only place I could be honest. Page after page filled with questions. I couldn't ask out loud with truths. I was too ashamed to speak with monologues drenched in confusion, guilt, and longing. I wrote things like, "How did I end up here? Why did it feel like love when it wasn't supposed to? When did I stop feeling like someone worth choosing?" And somewhere in those pages I wrote the one truth I couldn't deny. He didn't mean to hurt me. I didn't mean to mislead him. But hearts, when starved, reach for anything warm. I didn't blame him. He was young, open, honest, searching. He had come to me with trust, and I had stood too close to the fire knowing the heat could burn us both. But I was just so tired of the cold, and now we were both wounded, both treating, both unsure of what came next. He wasn't the villain, neither was I. We were just three souls caught in the wrong storm, trying to find comfort in a house that had long stopped feeling like home. Nights got longer, days felt heavier, and the silence between Henry and me, it wasn't just absence. It was consequence. I spent so many of those quiet hours inside my own mind, asking myself the questions that haunted me, turning them over like smooth stones in my hand, hoping I'd eventually find edges I could hold on to. Was it wrong to feel seen? Was I a monster for almost responding, because that's the part that kept catching in my throat? It wasn't what I did. It was what I almost did, the thought I almost followed, the line I almost crossed. Almost can hurt just as much as done. And I started wondering if Rob had just held me once, just once, if he'd looked me in the eyes and told me I mattered, if he'd kissed me without it being some routine gesture, would any of this have happened? I don't know. Maybe I would have never noticed the way Henry saw me. Maybe I would have brushed it off without a second thought. Maybe I wouldn't have mistaken trust for intimacy, loneliness for longing, but I can't rewrite what happened. I can only sit with it, and sitting with it hurts some people. Some of you watching this, you might say it was harmless, an emotional stumble, a misstep in the dark. Others, you'll call it unforgivable, and I wouldn't blame you because I've called myself worse. But here's what I've come to learn. This wasn't just about one moment. It was about 1,000 moments that came before it, 1,000 nights of feeling unseen, 1,000 mornings of wondering if I was still a woman or just a fixture in someone else's life. Henry wasn't the answer, he was the mirror. He reflected everything I'd buried. And in that reflection, I saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. I didn't want to feel like that again, so I made a choice. I started therapy quietly. Privately, just one session at first, then another. I sat across from a woman who didn't judge me, just listened, and for the first time I spoke the truth out loud. I almost mistook my son's affection for something. It wasn't because I forgot what it felt like to be loved. There was no drama in her face, no horror, just a nod, as if to say you're not the only one who's ever gotten lost. And slowly, painfully, I began to find my way back to myself. Not the woman who almost crossed a line, but the woman who saw that she was falling and stopped. I wrote Henry a letter one night, not to send, just to release. It said, "You reminded me. I still feel that I still exist beyond the roles I've been given, and for that I forgive us both, because I do. I forgive him for being young, for trusting me, for searching for something he didn't understand. And I'm learning slowly to forgive myself too. Not because what happened didn't matter, but because it did, because it woke me up. And now I'm finally learning how to live again, not through someone else's eyes, but through my own. Sometimes, people we're supposed to protect end up protecting us from truths we were afraid to face, from the loneliness we swore we'd learn to live with, from the hollowness we buried so deep we didn't even realize it was still there. This story isn't about scandal. It's not about betrayal, not in the way you might think. It's about something quieter, something more human. It's about longing to be seen, to be heard. To be held, not just physically but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It's about what happens when the people closest to us forget we have needs of our own, when we give everything and forget to save even a sliver for ourselves. It's about being loved by someone who wasn't supposed to be the one to do it, and the terrifying clarity that comes when you realize you almost let them. What happened between me and Henry didn't cross the line most people fear, but emotionally it danced right on the edge, and that's the part no one warns you about. No one talks about what it feels like to crave warmth so badly you stop checking where it's coming from. No one talks about how a smile, a glance, a soft word spoken at the right time can feel like a lifeline when you've been drowning for years. So, if you've ever found yourself emotionally tangled in a way you didn't expect, if you've ever had a moment where love, trust, and loneliness blurred together until you couldn't see the lines anymore, I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments anonymously. If you need to, this is a space without judgment, just truth, just honesty, just humanity. You are not alone. And if this story touched something in you, if it cracked open a part of your past or made you feel a little more seen today, please subscribe to Forbidden Desires. This was just one of the many tangled tales we explore here. Stories of real people, real pain, real desire, the kinds of stories that live in the shadows of ordinary life but shape us in ways we can't forget. Turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next, because the next story might just be the one that speaks to you. Until then, be gentle with yourself and remember, being seen isn't a luxury, it's a need. 1My story ends here. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next videos.